everyone. So, welcome to our electrical engineering webinar for our webinar series, Engineering Solutions for a Better World. So, I'm your host, Emma, and today we have a very special guest. It's Perry, and he is an electrical engineer. And yeah, he'll be sharing his experience about the field with you all today. And before I get started, I'll just give you all a quick run through of Science Holic and who we are. So, Science Holic is a youth-run nonprofit, and we aim to provide free and accessible, fun STEM resources for all students and teens. And yeah, so besides our webinars, which is what you're watching right now, we have our magazine and yeah, throughout the year, besides our conferences, such as this engineering conference, we have bi-monthly webinars as well. And yeah, feel free to check all those out on our website, scienceholic.org, shortly after this webinar. And yeah, without further ado, we'll get into today's topic of electrical engineering. So, welcome, Pary, again. Would you mind giving a brief introduction of yourself?
Yeah, for sure. I've been an engineer for between 5 and 6 years now, and I've worked in automotive, aerospace, and defense industries. The coolest thing I've worked on was a space shuttle that it was supposed to launch this year, but they've been pushing it back for other reasons that they have. But it was an amazing experience being there, and I learned so much, and I had a lot of fun. And I started a YouTube channel, which I was telling Emma earlier is actually my friend. It was as a joke, but as it turned out, it actually went really, really well. And I found more ways to utilize engineering and have it just make other parts of my life better. And I love it. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And yeah, before we get into our questions prepared for today, this is just a quick reminder to the attendees that if you guys, happen to have any further questions while we are going through the webinar, please feel free to message us in the Zoom chat and we'll get onto those questions in the live Q&A session at the end. So yeah, here are our first set of questions about sort of starting out and preparing for electrical engineering. So first off, how did you find your passion for electrical engineering?
I really thought about this question, and I don't know if I found my passion so much as I created it, because there are certainly parts of electrical engineering that I do not enjoy, and there's other parts that I absolutely would not be able to live without. And I think in terms of finding my passion, uh, when when you're in college studying, I will say this: college is, at least to me, it was significantly more difficult than the actual job itself. And while I was there, taking all sorts of different classes was a way of showing you what you could be doing with this field because it's so variable in so many different ways. And I found a couple of them that really interested me, and I wanted to learn more about them, and I wanted to contribute to them. And before I knew it, I was just on this job and I was doing it for a couple of years, and I was like, oh, I really like this. And I didn't know how much, specifically for passion, I didn't realize that I even had a passion for it until COVID, when I got laid off due to COVID cuts and I couldn't do my job anymore. And I was like, wow, I don't miss working. I actually miss this. So I guess I didn't know it was really a passion or a love until I didn't have it anymore. And even the parts that aren't so fun about it, it makes the parts that you do like so much better. So I found my passion for electrical engineering just through interest in college, and then one when I couldn't do it anymore, and I really, really wanted to. That's how I knew I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Mhm. I hope that was a
And
good answer. If these aren't sufficient enough answers, please ask questions. I hope like I can add value here.
no, but yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. So yeah, next up, what did you study in school and how did that prepare you for your career later on?
Okay, uh, I I hope I don't dissuade people here. You will not use 99% of what you learn in school on your actual job. And it's not because school is teaching you these things just to mess with you. It's because there's so many things you could do with electrical engineering, especially that I didn't know what I wanted to do if I wasn't exposed to all the different disciplines. So what I studied in school, I have an undergrad in electrical and biomedical engineering, and I studied a little bit of. I'm pretty sure I took every intro class just because I wanted to figure out what is there to do with this, and I don't suppose I studied anything that was besides the biomedical engineering concentration. I went to Michigan State University that had a really have a heavy emphasis on analog versus a lot of other schools are doing a lot more digital. I knew that I wanted to do hardware engineering because I really don't like coding. I can do it. I don't like it. But in terms of how did school prepare me for my career, it showed me things that I liked and didn't like, so it helped me narrow my focus on what job I wanted to work once I graduated. And when I say you don't apply most of what you learn, it's not that most of what you learn is not valuable. It's that when when you're on an engineering team and you're submitting projects and you're completing your work, it's similar to being in a like imagine if every student in your classroom took the same exam and you all like if it's a group of 30 kids and you all break off into six groups of five. Well, each five of those kids turns in one paper with everyone's name on it. And the professor looks over every exam and then gives that to the dean and says, okay, I've corrected the mistakes here. That's what the real world is. That it's very, very different than uh, when you're in school, if you get something wrong, they mark you down for it. And on the real job, if you get something wrong, they ask you where did things go wrong. You're not actually punished for it, and that's why. And like when you actually figure out what parts of the engineering career that you want to do, you're working with other people that have the same goal as you. You're not, I guess, in a way, you're. Like, I don't really see myself as competitive with them, but school is really helpful for just exposing you to all different things of what it could be so you can figure out I know exactly what I want to do and how I want to do it.
Hmm. No, for sure. I think that totally aligns with sort of what other professionals have told us about, sort of like school and the real job. Like I believe it was for our computer science webinar. So our guest, she was a software engineer and she studied
Nice.
comp sci in school and she was saying how, like really when it was time for her to go into the real job, it was really more about like the soft skills that she accumulated throughout, and it's not
Yeah,
necessarily the content in itself. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's very valuable.
for sure.
Mhm. And yeah, so next up, there are so many facets within electrical engineering. So what inspired you to pursue, the specific direction of your career?
Well, I don't know how this answer will be received, but I don't like school. I've never enjoyed sitting in lecture halls, or I love learning, otherwise, I wouldn't have completed the degree. But I really don't like sitting in a classroom and having someone lecture to me and taking written tests. I always liked the labs so much more than any other type of class. And that was when I realized that I like doing this stuff with my hands. Being behind the computer is majority of the job, and that's totally acceptable, and that makes sense, and it's okay. I've always liked for most of my job I did wire harnesses, and I hadn't even heard of a wire harness until I graduated. There was no class on it or anything like that. I I remember looking up like what job pays the most amount of money with the least amount of time in school, and how can I use math and science in that job. Thankfully to me, the top 10 lists were all engineering based, and number 10 was computer science. I was like, oh, this is perfect. So like that's how I chose engineering, because I was like, I knew I wanted to do something in math and science, and I did not want to be in school like a doctor. And when I found that I could, with mechanical engineering, not to talk crap about the other disciplines because they're important, it was surprisingly more limited than I thought because with electrical, you don't have to just worry about, and I say worry in a good way here, not a bad way. Like you don't have to concern yourself with only if you're working in CAD, just can it fit? That's the question that I've seen most mechanical engineers ask is like, can I put this where I want it to go? But for electrical engineering, not only do you have to worry about that, it's also something like, can I get power there? Like, is there enough length of wire, or is there what's the like? There's so many more questions to be answered, and that's the part that I really like doing. Is to me, it's more like solving a puzzle. So whatever puzzle I wanted to solve the most, and I found for me that was had more to do with hardware. I found a career path that allowed me to solve the problems that I wanted to solve.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's also really important to keep in mind for, especially students. Like you really don't know where your career may take you later
No, it's
on.
so weird
Hmm.
too. Because when I was like from I don't know what it is at other universities, but as far as Michigan goes, doesn't matter what school you go to in Michigan. If you're an engineer, it's pretty much are you going to go to GM, Ford, or Fiat Chrysler, or one of like the automotive companies because they're the biggest recruiters on campus. They're the ones who give out all the internships and co-ops and learning opportunities outside of your classroom. And I was like that's but it's so strange because that job in the automotive industry is actually what got me to NASA, and I would have never possibly thought that. It was because we were using a program called Capital, which I still use today at this new job, and I learned it in the automotive industry. And then when they hired me, I realized like, oh, you can actually apply this program to anything. So that's one thing I did not see coming is that uh, like for example, if you're coding, if you can use Python or C++, you don't you can apply that to so many industries in so many ways. There's really no reason to limit yourself. And I actually don't even know what you asked initially, but I just thought that was important to get out about school. Is if you have no idea where you're going, I actually don't know of any of my classmates that I graduated with who are today where they thought they would be today in a good way. Like they, I mean, a lot of us actually got accepted to other places in Silicon Valley. We didn't like it. Like it's actually strange to say this, but that was a couple of my friends. They got jobs at Microsoft, and I was offered a position at SpaceX. When I went out there and I talked to the other engineers, it's such a different experience that you would never believe. Like don't get me wrong, the campus was pretty amazing, and having free Jamba Juice and smoothies all the time that was pretty great. But it feels so weird to say this, but it kind of took away from the job, which I really enjoyed doing. Like it was just there were too many other distractions, but I was like, but when do I do stuff? And I learned that you can actually do a lot more in sometimes in startups or in other companies that are starting new programs.
Hmm. For sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right, so this sort of goes hand in hand with everything, but what advice do you have for transitioning from your academic to professional career?
Yeah, I had a really hard time with this. I'm glad you're asking this question because I think this is a pretty generic answer, but I don't know of a better one. But patience is a good one. It's really like imagine if the people who are currently listening are going to watch this. Are they current students? Most of them.
Yes. Hmm.
Oh, okay. Remember when you were in elementary school and when you were in kindergarten, you looked at the fifth graders and other people, and you were just like, "Wow, they know everything." And then you get to fifth grade, and you're just like, "That's it." Like when you graduate, you're like, "Wait, that's all that was." And then when you get to middle school, it's the same thing. Like the eighth graders, they've been there, done that, they know everything. And then when you graduate, you're just like, "That wasn't nearly as bad." So when you're in college, when you actually get to a senior level of whatever you're studying, it doesn't matter. You know more than, I mean, aside from the professors, you know more than any other student on campus because you've done all the prereqs and all the lectures and you've done it all. And this is where it becomes really pragmatic because you are in a position of, I've, I have the grades and I've had the experience. I want to go do stuff in the real world. Well, when you get to the real world, you go back to being in kindergarten because you don't know anything. And that can get really, really frustrating because I don't know of any engineer that has ever today that has ever solved an integral on their job. I don't know of any engineer that has done derivatives, exponents, using like Euclidean coordinates for like most of that. And the reason they don't use it is not because it's useless, it's because those problems have already been solved. Like there's no need for anyone to do it with pen and paper because you can just put it into a computer. All the equations are already there. The purpose of teaching that to you is actually so you can better understand your problem solving skills. And there's some other advantages to that. But that's the biggest thing I could emphasize is understand that you're going from a position of like the highest level of engineering student back to kindergarten. That's what it'll feel like, and that is completely okay. It's going to require some patience, but it's you're around people who have been doing it for so long that you're like, wow, these guys know everything. But once you get to that stage, like once you get to that fifth grade level again, you're just like, wait, they didn't know everything. It just took them a couple of years to get the hang of this stuff. And that if I can go back and tell myself what would help me, it would just be that exact analogy. Be patient. You went from being the reference for all the underclassmen on campus to the guy asking all the questions again because you don't know anything. And that can be frustrating. And that's okay. Just be patient like you were when you were first an engineering student and you knew nothing. This has a lot more rewards. It pays much better.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. That's super valuable advice, I think. All right, so next up, these are more sort of career focus questions.
Okay.
So yeah, first up, what were the challenges that you faced working in electrical?
I face the same challenges actually at every job I've worked, funny enough, and it's got nothing to do with engineering. It actually has more to do with soft skills, like whoever was speaking about that earlier. It's yeah, of the phases of I'm a contractor. I love doing that, so I can jump between jobs and projects as I choose. And the challenges actually have less to do with technically what needs to get done, and it has more to do with can you actually get the information necessary to do your job? That can be a bit frustrating, especially given today, everyone, it's a pretty generic statement, but everybody is very specialized. And if, for example, this is very typical on every engineering job, is if you wanted to understand further information, but your company is compartmentalizing the information for security reasons. They have their own purposes to it. It becomes frustrating because you cannot move on to the next step of your job until you receive the information from someone somewhere else. And there's no whenever my manager asked me like, so why isn't this complete? Like, I don't have the information I need. Well, why don't you have it? I didn't get the reply. I don't know. I can send more emails. I could call them, but there's nothing I can really do to get the information from somebody to complete my portion. I literally cannot move forward without it. And that's a challenge whether you're at a startup or a well established corporation. Compartmentalization is pro security, but it hurts productivity.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely you know, a big challenge for, regardless of whatever field you're working in. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing. All right, next up, what mentors have you had throughout your career?
I, I don't know if you care. I'll use his name, but his name is Dash Adams. And that guy is I don't know how he does what he does, but he's like the god engineer. He works in the aerospace industry. I don't want to say that where he's currently working, but my gosh, like he was. I didn't even know he was going to be a mentor of mine until I joined Sierra Space, which is like part of NASA, and he was like he like I never had a formal conversation like, hey, do you want to be my mentor? It just turned out that way because he was my reference for questions regarding not just how do I do this job, but he was also a contractor. So I was asking him questions about pay negotiation and moving costs and just getting along with other people from other cultures because he worked in Japan for a couple of years. And if we're on a Teams call, for example, with, oh, sorry about that, that's my phone. If we're on a Teams call, for example, with people who are overseas, you are not allowed to actually use certain words or speak in a certain turn of phrase because you could offend somebody without even knowing you're doing it. And I didn't even consider any of that stuff when I started working at this in this career field. And he was very helpful in just getting me on track of what was supposed to be completed, how to do the job more effectively, and how to communicate with my coworkers and superiors in a way that it was like in a respectful way of getting things done. I think that was so actually, yeah, now that I say it, he helped me a lot more outside of the technical aspect of the job than the actual job itself. Because for the most part, I haven't had anyone not help me, if that makes sense. Like in terms of mentors or coworkers, people are really chill about this sort of thing. If you really don't know what to do, ask, and they're super available for information. Uh, yeah, just ask questions. People are they're really nice. They will help you.
Hmm. So yeah, what would you recommend for, maybe like college students or any, perhaps like young professional? How would you recommend them sort of going about and, um, really communicating with a mentor?
I would suggest what this is actually one of my friend's ideas, what I thought was genius, and it worked for him. He's currently working at Apple, and he spoke with professors because your professors in school, they likely weren't always professors. They probably had a job outside of academia at some point, or at least they know former students, people. That network is very valuable. And even if they can't help you get a full-time position, which I've never had one not help me, but if they can't, the way that I would approach that conversation is like ask what networking is about what you can do for the other person. If it's about what they can do for you, I mean that's an employee. That's not really a network. You want to go to your professor and it's it's gonna be like being in kindergarten again, even though you have all the information. It's what can I do for you to show that I'm serious about this? That's what my friend asked this one professor at Michigan State, and he had him just clean up lab equipment and write paperwork. And he did that for about half a semester. And then towards the end, the professor was running experiments with him and they were doing research on electromagnetism for like, which it sounds crazy. They were working on 8G technology. Like, yeah, we are like three, no, they're doing 8G stuff. It's kind of insane. But that's how we got there. It was presenting what can I do for you? And if it really is just something as simple as cleaning out beakers or lab stuff or paperwork, you are showing this professor that you are committed to actually getting this done. And that's how you develop a relationship. It's what can you do for the other person before you start asking about, hey, can you help me get this job? Because what incentive does that professor have to help you? I mean, really none. Like out of the goodness of their hearts, sure, but let's be real about this. If you can add value to them, they are far more likely to add value to you. So that's how I would approach the conversation. If it's a professor at a if it's a research university as opposed to a teaching one, that's actually much better in your favor because you can ask them, "What can I do for you, and how can I contribute to your research?" Well, that's how relationships are built. Is what can you do for them?
Hmm. For sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
All right, our next question. What have been your most exciting career opportunities so far?
Aerospace and working on that NASA space shuttle were really cool because I met I met a lot of people that are really smart and they're so good at what they do that it's really nice just being in that environment because there's so much that you can learn from so many other people. I get that. I'm trying to think of I don't know if there is an opportunity that was presented to me that I didn't take. Now that I think about it. And Actually, I think like in terms of career opportunities, just like with mentors, they generally start before you know it. Like I did not know that Dash would ever be a mentor of mine, but it just over the years just so happened. Like when you're building a network, for example, if you're focusing on a network, it's not going to work. It's just as you develop relationships, as you become more useful to other people, they're going to want to do more for you, and that's like how they contribute. So exciting career opportunities. Working on the space shuttle was great. I did the wire harnesses for the command module as well as the shuttle itself, and I worked on shell heaters so that when you actually launch this thing all the way upstairs, it's going to develop a lot of ice as it goes through all the condensation and layers of our atmosphere, and that will actually offset the weight of it. So it was my responsibility to implement these. They basically look like iPads, and it just breaks the ice. That's literally all it was for. But that's not something I would have ever thought that I would do in college or as a student. These are not because you don't do these things as students. Like that's what I thought was weird is you'll start developing more opportunities the more you help other people because they will remember that and you'll be able to take a lot of pride in helping someone else do their work and then when you need a recommendation, they will be there. I've never had someone flake on me for that before because people will remember how you made them feel. So your my most exciting career opportunities have like other than the actual technical job, it has more to do with people than how good you are at coding or how good you are at using certain software.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. You know, like again, you really never know what could happen down the line through your career, especially with as you gain more people in your network, and so
Right.
forth. Yeah, thank you. All right, so another question. What would be one piece of advice you would give to your younger self? It could be, younger self from 10 years ago or, maybe even your high school self. But yeah, that can be left up to interpretation.
I it's a that's a really good question. What would be? Well, if I really could go back in time, I would be telling my younger self a lot more than one piece of advice. But if I could share one, uh, other than put your money in Amazon stock, I would suggest whenever things get really hard, and I mean not just for school or for your job or if you have a girlfriend or boyfriend or between your parents, any sort of relationship, whenever things get really hard, I remember I used to I used to sometimes I would never say this out loud, but in my head I would be like, man, I wish life was easier until I met people who actually had what I thought would be easier, and I was like, oh, I do not want to live like that at all. And so like I think the one thing that I would advise is don't wish that life was easier. Wish that you were stronger because I think like there's a lot more problems on the way, and that's completely okay. That's actually not the problem. It's more like your attitude towards the problem is the bigger issue than the actual problem at hand. And so I would certainly tell my younger self that whenever you encounter difficulty, just ask yourself, like, okay, this is a chance for me to be better than this problem. And if you really can overcome it, it it won't repeat itself. That's something I couldn't fathom as a kid was as you're growing up and if you're a student, you're introduced to a plethora of new problems all the time. It's the first romantic relationship. It's your friend that you said like, "Yo, we're gonna be like friends like forever," and then they end up moving away. It's not they're not against you; they're just for themselves. No worries. It's a but this stuff. It's the first time it happens to you at a younger age, so you think that this is really really sucky. I would say it's gonna be okay. And most of the problems that you encounter at a younger age, they more or less just repeat themselves. So if you can figure it out now when you are younger and you have a larger capacity to fail, these problems that used to be a really big deal you just brush them right off as you get older. So don't run away from issues. Just if you can face it now, you will be forever better for it. Don't run away from it.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I think, especially now, I see my friends in school going through like college applications and like just the whole process. I think it's really easy to sort of just get caught up in everything and feel, just stressed out all the time. But yeah, I think that's super important to remember that, yeah, at the end of the day, it really will all work out. So yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it will too. If I don't know of anyone who it hasn't worked out in the end for them. And if it's not working out for you right now, then it's not the end. This is not the time to stop and give up.
Hmm. For sure. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so now we're in our concluding session of our webinar, which is our live Q&A. So right now we'll just be open to any questions that our attendees may have. So yeah, if you haven't already, y'all can leave any questions, comments within the chat. You can message us. All right, so I have a message right here. One of our attendees asked, what was it really like working at NASA?
What do you mean? What was it really like? I want to answer your question, but could you be more specific?
No, yeah, I'll ask our attendee. Yeah, so they want to know more about sort of like the technical aspects of working there.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll tell you this. When my first day actually getting my photo taken for my ID and all that stuff, I it was really weird because like I've heard of this company since I was a kid. I didn't think I'd ever get here. But one thing that I remember thinking was, is this shit about to be rocket science? Because this is going to be interesting. And a little bit of it was, most of it wasn't. Because a lot of those problems had already been solved before. So, with regards to technically what tasks I was given, they don't give you everything all at once. I was, in fact, when I first got there, everyone who gets there, you're always assigned a, like, they call it a mentor, but it's, people use that word to varying degrees. The one that I was assigned wasn't nearly as helpful as the one I spoke about earlier. Like, that wasn't the fault of the person who was assigned to me. That's just because they were actually leaving the company. So they were like, hey, I'm trying to get out of here anyway. I don't really have time to teach. And that's no worries. It's not anything that you can't handle. I think that that's another piece of advice I would give my former self is, it's, think about all the stuff you've already gone through, and then remember that the space shuttle itself and everything around you, it was built by people who are not smarter than you. That really did, like, that's, and I'm not saying I was the smartest person there. I most certainly wasn't. But like something I picked up on was, like, it's, the challenges that you'll face on this job are actually not, they're usually not technical problems. Uh, and I think the reason, so the space shuttle I was working on is called the Dream Chaser. And while working on it with Sierra Space, they had already they had already solved a lot of technical problems. So for, in terms of what I was responsible for, which was the wire harnesses and other stuff like that, I didn't have to like start from scratch. I was already starting from, that's another thing too, is the chances that you start from absolute scratch on any task or job you're doing is zero. And I mean like zero. I don't know of any engine ever. Like you are not going to be like assigned something that's like, okay, we've never done this before. No one has any idea how it's going to work. We don't know where to test it, how to do it. But good luck, bro. That's not going to happen. The the company wants you to thrive. So if you're not able to accomplish some of the technical tasks, ask questions, people want you to make it. They're not paying you out of charity. They're paying you because they want you to succeed and do better here. So if you don't know what you're doing and you ask questions, that will not be taken negatively because there are way too many people that don't know what they're doing and they do nothing about it. So if you're the person that's asking questions and admitting that you don't know what's going on, they don't take that negatively. And so I hope that answered your question.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, that was great. Thank you. All right, we have another question here. One of our attendees asked, if you were brand new into this field of engineering with no prior knowledge of the theories or concepts of this field, how would you go about learning the knowledge required?
If I had no prior knowledge, so like if I was a kid in high school who didn't know what electrical engineering was, and if I wanted to do it, like how would I go about getting the knowledge?
Mm-hmm. I believe so.
That is a good. Who asked that question?
Well, you have to thank one of
That,
our attendees here.
that's
Mm-hmm.
that's a good question. Oh man, that's like asking if you had absolutely no idea what the answer was on a multiple choice test, would you pick B or C? And I'm not sure. If I had no knowledge, I guess if I had no knowledge, then how do you know you want to do this? But ignoring that, huh? I'm trying to. I'm doing my. I really want to answer this question because I like it, but I don't know of a scenario in my life where I've ever embarked on something where I had no knowledge but I wanted to do it. If it's something, I'm sorry, I don't know if I don't know how to answer that question. I like it, but I don't know if I can. I don't think this is what you're asking, but if you're asking about where to get resources, MIT OpenCourseWare is free, and a lot of the stuff is already on YouTube. If you wanted to, like, if you were debating on what college you wanted to go to, you can literally look up lectures from that university. They're probably already free on YouTube. If you didn't know what part of electrical engineering you wanted to go into, then there is more information available now than ever before. I would advise go to LinkedIn. That's something that benefited me when I was looking for my next contract job was uh, just asking people like hey, I know nothing about this company other than they make this one thing. I don't know what goes into it. I don't know how it works, but I think it's really cool. How? I I, I just ask the people who are already working there, but I don't know how to relate to that question because I've never started something with zero knowledge, but I wanted to do it. If I wanted to do it, it's because I had some background on it. So I'm sorry, I don't know how to answer that, but that's all I have for you.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, thank you. I think that's also reassuring for, I think students in general that you won't really be going into something that's like completely, you know, not done before. So, yeah,
Right?
thank
Yeah.
you. Mm-hmm.
This is both meant to be a good thing and a bad thing. You're not Steve Jobs. You're not Elon Musk. And I don't know if you want to be those guys either. That's what I'm saying. Is like they so like the word design is thrown around a lot in engineering. That was one thing when I was actually, you know what? I think I have a way of answering that question now. Because when I was a student, like when I was going for like my first job, which is very different than uh, like the world of academics, I did ask the question like to other engineers in my family and family friends, like, what do you do? And they would give me answers such as, I'm redefining the way that smartwatches interface with vehicles. I'm like, no, you're not. No, you're not. When you get to your desk on your job and you open your laptop, okay, that's the first thing you do in the morning. Now what? What do you do? Who do you talk to? What programs do you use? What does your day look? That's what I wanted to know. And it took me so many people because so many engineers use the word design. You're not designing much. I don't, like I said, not in a bad way. It's just a lot of the problems have already been solved. What you're mostly doing is making them better. So you're answering questions where there's no possible answer. So one of them is the question of how do we make it faster? Whether it's a car or an airplane or a microprocessor or microcontroller, there's no end to that question. It can always be faster. And it's how do we make it more efficient? It's not possible. Like once you get to which the most we can do is 99% efficiency, since we are imperfect people taking imperfect measurements to build imperfect products, there's always going to be stuff for us to do. But I was always skeptical whenever someone told me, "Oh, I'm designing this," and I was like, "What's your role in the company?" And they say, "I'm a senior engineer." I'm like, "Oh, you're not designing anything. Principal engineers are the ones who, if you say you're in design, I believe you. But like juniors, like it's like the guy Dash, he's a principal engineer. He's been doing this for 20 years. Like that, if he says he's designed, I believe him. But it's but yeah, like that's a I was really nervous about that. Finally, one guy told me when I like he was an MBA, but he was a mechanical engineer for many years. He's like, when I get to the job, I open my laptop, I look at my emails, and I work with suppliers to get us certain like parts of the automotive industry, and I look at prices because most of the engineering jobs you'll work, the price of the product actually matters. That was something different with NASA is that they're only making two shuttles, so it really doesn't matter to us how much it costs for. Like we could literally use like gold plated pins and stuff like that for our connectors. That's fine because you're only going to make two of them and you're not selling them to a consumer market. But if you work for the automotive industry, then fractions of a penny will be taken into account when you're making something because they got to make 100,000 cars. So it like that small difference goes a long way. So if like that was the first person I ever talked to where I was like, I have no idea what to do and I don't know what to expect. He was like, laptop, email. Did I get the parts I need? Is it the price point that I want? And negotiate with them. And then after that is like, okay, I have a CAD assignment, which is something I've had like backlogged, and it was, can I actually get this dimension correctly? And if I do, send it to that person so they can do their job. You like no matter where you are, like whether you're a director or entry level, you will be in the middle of a lot of information being transferred. That's very normal. Like your function, other than actually doing the technical work, is sending information to where it's supposed to go. That's what I was saying earlier about I can't do what I need to do until I get it from so and so. But that's also true for the guys. Someone's waiting on me, just like I'm waiting on them. So I mean, I also I don't know if answering that question would even help because it's kind of like explaining to a bird what it's like to swim underwater. Like even if I told you, you'd be like, "What do you mean?" Like, well, until you actually get in the water, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. So, because for when I was a student, all you know is school. Like, all you know is if the God, how many times I've been marked down for this. Like, if the math teacher says you got to solve it this way and you don't solve it that way, you get marked down. God, that would frustrate me to no end. But if you do that in the real world, you get a raise. Like if you found a way to solve a problem that is non-traditional, you will be regarded for that. It won't be a bad thing. So I like the part of the difficulty in answering the question like that is just it's you don't know, which is not your fault, but you don't know what it's like to work in a corporate environment. So for me to tell someone like if you have no knowledge, what do you expect? Like how can you tell a bird what it's like to swim underwater? I don't know. I don't know how to describe that. But but I promise you it's not bad. Like it has never been as bad as I thought for any class exam or anything like you will be okay. I promise you'll be okay.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Thank you so much. And yeah, I don't want to like name drop or anything, but I have to say shout out to Eric, our attendee here for that question. That was a great question.
That was a good question. Yeah, I like it a
Yeah.
lot.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, in fact, we have another question here. do you believe that the continued advancements in AI um, will lead to, sorry, the demand for electrical engineers' jobs to increase due to the need for better or more efficient chips? I believe, sorry, do you believe that continued advancements in AI demand? Okay, so I believe he's asking, with the advancements in AI, will it be necessary to develop more efficient chips for electrical engineers?
I do think it will. That was one of the questions where there's no answer to it. It's there's always a way to make it more efficient. And if 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 the person asking that question works at Nvidia, I wonder how that would get taken because I don't see a scenario like so like implying that there's no more need to make it more efficient says that we reach max efficiency, and that has not been true throughout human history because if we had, then we wouldn't be innovating in that field anymore, and it's not been the case. So I think that not only will there be uh, a drive for more efficient chips because that'll help the company a lot. That means they have to buy less hardware. But there's also going to be a need for more specifically hardware engineers in the AI field because a programmer, like for them to be effective at their job, they need to have a computer with the correct capabilities and performance in front of them. A hardware engineer builds the computer. I mean, very roughly speaking, obviously you have to like program some of it. But I mean that's the same thing with these AI chips is for the from what I understand, which is very limited, then a lot of what already has been done is based off technology that has already existed. And I mean, I guess there's no other way of doing it. But yeah, like there you have to make it more efficient because there there's no part of that AI process that is even close to 99% efficiency. So I guess like at every possible layer it can improve. So I don't see why it wouldn't. And because it's so like whenever I get questions like this, and then the same question gets asked on my job, the answers are so different. It's so weird to even think about. But like let's if you're gonna work in a company that's developing a product, like a physical, like if it's an iPhone or a MacBook Pro or like a car, then just know that if you're in a meeting with a customer, they're probably wrong. And I know that sounds weird, like not to, in a braggadocious way, but whoever said the customer is always right was, I promise you, never a business owner. They were only ever a customer. Because really, like if as an engineer, like your primary responsibility is to make things more efficient and to innovate. Well, if and like where do you get those demands is from the world where it was like we need better plumbing, electricity, and like iPhones. Well, if you gave people only what they ask for, we wouldn't have cars. We would just have faster horses. So I mean, so do not like that's why like when you ask these same questions on the actual job, you'll be surprised how different the answers are. There's never a time where you can't make it better. So that was my very long-winded answer for that question. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, do you think with the sort of fast-paced evolution of AI that will affect like the demand for electrical engineering jobs? Like, how do you think those
Oh,
would
yeah, it's
correlate?
gonna send them to the moon, like
Yeah.
skyrocket them. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Because I mean, when for actually, yeah, I can't think of any time in human history whenever there's a significant new innovation that reduces one industry, it generally demands a lot more for the other. So an example of that is like when Airbnb came out, like just as an application on your phone, many people believe this is the end of hotels because it was like, why would you ever pay for this when you can literally get better accommodation at a cheaper price in a more home? Everyone thought like, why would I ever pay for a hotel anymore? When Airbnb came out, the hotel industry grew more than it ever has before. These are something no one saw coming, and it's a similar example to self-driving cars. When it's like, okay, well, what do you need drivers for anymore? Like, well, ever since that technology has emerged, companies that transfer, like whether it's like food or supply, whatever it is, you're transferring by a truck, they've grown really quickly. So like that's why it's often flipped. Like whenever there is a new significant innovation, like during the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't that we had like more than half of the world who weren't engineers become unemployed. That's not at all what happened. Historically, what happens is when this new industry is created, the good news is about being a student is that nobody really knows the best way to go about it. And that's a pretty awesome place to be because you get to be part of that. Like you get to be a part of that group of people that figure out how AI is regulated. You get to figure out how these chips can be better manufactured and produced, created, and like efficiency. Because if you join like the automotive industry, for example, like besides Tesla, there's no one's really asking, can we make it more efficient? Like obviously somewhere, but they're more focused on can we make more money off of it. So I guess that's I can't see when the demand for electrical engineers goes down. At least I hope it doesn't. But I really can't see it going down just because anywhere you have a wire or electrical power being transferred, you'll need one of us. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm gonna use that somewhere else too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you. But yeah, I think it's about time that we'll be wrapping up this webinar since we have following webinars for the conference later today. But I do see that we still have some questions in the chat. So Perry, would you mind if I leave your email for our attendees if they have, any more questions for
Yeah,
you?
yeah. I mean, I have time now, but if email works better, then that works. That's no problem.
Hmm. But yeah, sorry everyone, but we do need to use this Zoom space for other guests later on.
Okay, for
But
sure.
yeah, thank you so much for coming, and thank you all to the attendees for coming today. So there's Perry's email for you all in the chat. And yeah, so before we wrap it up for tonight, do we have Florence, do we have our slides for yeah, so along with the webinars for our engineering conference, we also have the Science Holic magazine. So we have the first issue of our engineering edition out right now. So you all can go check that out on scienceholic.org. And along with that, you can follow us on social media for more content, which will be on the next slide. So on Instagram, we're at Scientology Official, and you can email us for any questions or concerns too. And yeah, I believe we have some more slides. So yeah, if you are interested in working with us, you can help us in many different ways, including being a team member. So you can join any of our branches from content, editing, or to outreach, which is the branch that I'm a part of. And if you have any writing or art that you think could be beneficial to us as a STEM organization, you can submit those for our blog through our email as well. And yeah, so here are partnerships for the engineering conference. So shout out to all of these amazing organizations, and please go check them out as well after our webinar. And yeah, thank you all again for joining today. To our attendees for watching, and of course to Pary for coming to, speak to us today. Thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you guys so much. I think you just gave me a really good idea. I'm going to probably make a YouTube video about what a day in the life looks like for an electrical engineer because I haven't seen that on the internet yet. But I think that would probably help a lot of people and answer a lot of the questions that were asked here. Yeah.
Well, yeah, there you go. And yeah, to our attendees, Pary has a YouTube channel, so y'all can go subscribe to him, enjoy his
Yeah.
content
Just
there.
that's the
Uh-huh.
best way to reach me, probably.
Yeah, uh-huh. Yeah. All right then. Thank you all so much again. And our next session is going to be at 7:45 today. And you can also see us for other sessions tomorrow at same time, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Bye.
Mhm.